The cemetery was supposed to be silent at dawn, just the weight of grief and names etched in granite. But when the Mafia boss, Morgan Sampson, walked toward his son's grave, he heard something that didn't belong in a place reserved for the powerful dead. A child quietly weeping. He stopped. No security detail, no noise, just a tiny girl kneeling before the tombstone that bore his son's name. Her small shoulders shook with each sob. Her fingers clutched something metallic, holding it as if it were the last piece of someone she loved. Morgan's breath caught in his chest. No one visited this grave but him. 6 months of rage, and he'd never seen another soul here. He approached slowly, his shoes crunching against the gravel. "Little one, why are you here?" he asked, his voice rough with grief he couldn't hide. The girl flinched, her tear-streaked face turning toward him, but she didn't run. Instead, she held up a pair of worn military dog tags. "He was supposed to be my hero," she whispered. "He told me he was coming back to keep me safe." Morgan froze. His son hadn't told him anything. Not about a little girl, not about a promise, not about being someone's hero. His heart began to pound as the girl lifted her eyes and spoke the words that would shatter everything. "He was fixing the bad things so we could be a family." Morgan staggered back. The truth his son had carried to the grave was now kneeling before him, exposing a life Morgan knew nothing about. And nothing in his blood-soaked past could have prepared him for what came next. "Stay with me until the end, because what this little girl reveals will expose a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of power." Before we begin, hit subscribe and comment what you think Elias was hiding. Now, let's get started. 6 months had passed since the ambush that killed Elias. The head of New York's most feared crime family hadn't shed a tear at the funeral, standing motionless while senators and judges filed past, everyone who owed him favors, everyone who feared him. Now, walking through the iron gates of the private cemetery, Morgan felt the weight of every choice he'd ever made. His black suit was stark against the tattoos covering his neck and hands as he approached the granite marker where Elias rested. That's when he heard it, the soft, broken sound of crying. Morgan's hand moved toward his concealed weapon. In his world, unexpected sounds meant danger. But when he rounded the monument, he saw a little girl, no more than 7 years old, kneeling in front of Elias's grave, her small hands pressed against the cold stone. The girl spoke to the headstone as if Elias could hear her. "I'm sorry I couldn't find you sooner," she whispered. "I brought what you gave me. I kept it safe like you told me to." Morgan knelt beside the girl, his imposing frame somehow gentler in her presence. "What's your name, little one?" he asked softly. "Beatrice," she whispered, clutching the dog tags tighter. "Beatrice Melendez. How did you know my son?" The girl's eyes filled with fresh tears. "He found me. I was sleeping in a doorway near the subway. It was cold, and I was so hungry. He gave me his jacket and bought me food. He said he was going to help me find my real family." Morgan's joy tightened. His son, the soldier who'd rejected the family business, had been protecting abandoned children in the streets. "What family, Beatrice?" "My mama left me at a church when I was little." Elias said there were papers, adoption papers, birth certificates, but bad people made them disappear. He said he was going to fix it, get me into a safe place where nobody could hurt me anymore. Her small voice cracked. He promised he'd come back. Morgan's hands trembled as he reached toward the dog tags. Beatrice hesitated, then slowly placed them in his tattooed palm. The metal was warm from her grip, worn smooth in places from constant handling. He turned them over, examining them in the pale morning light. Standard military issue. Elias's name, service number, blood type. But as Morgan held them, something felt wrong. One tag was heavier than the other, slightly thicker. His pulse quickened. "Beatrice, where exactly did Elias give these to you?" "The last time I saw him. He said if anything happened, I should keep them safe and bring them here. He said someone would come who needed to see them." Her eyes widened. "Are you that someone?" Morgan didn't answer. He pulled a small pocket knife from his jacket and carefully worked the blade along the edge of the thicker tag. The seam was nearly invisible, expertly concealed. With a soft click, the tag separated. Inside, nestled in a custom-cut hollow, was a tiny encrypted USB drive. Morgan stared at it, his breath caught in his throat. His son had hidden something so important he'd literally worn it around his neck and trusted a 7-year-old girl to deliver it. "What is it?" Beatrice asked. "The truth," Morgan whispered. "The truth your hero died protecting. If you hate the idea of a child being abandoned and unprotected, hit subscribe. Only heartless people would look away." Morgan's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a Manhattan high-rise, a fortress of steel and glass that money and fear had built. Beatrice sat quietly on the leather sofa, her small frame dwarfed by the luxury surrounding her. She clutched a glass of warm milk Morgan had poured, her eyes taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He made the call from his private office, door half open so he could keep the girl in sight. "Leah, I need you here. Now." 30 minutes later, a woman in her late 30s arrived, carrying a sleek laptop case. Leah Chen had once been the CIA's best digital analyst before a crisis of conscience drove her out. Now she worked exclusively for Morgan, decrypting secrets that others wanted to stay buried. She asked no questions as Morgan handed her the USB drive, just plugged it into an isolated system, and began typing. Beatrice watched from the doorway, her eyes curious but cautious. "Military-grade encryption," Leah muttered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Your son knew what he was doing. This is layered, multiple protocols, biometric signatures embedded in the code structure." She paused, adjusting her approach. "Give me 20 minutes. 15 minutes later, the screen flickered. A simple audio file appeared. Morgan's hand trembled as he clicked play. Static, then breathing. Heavy, panicked breathing. Then his son's voice, urgent and raw in a way Morgan had never heard. "Dad, if you're hearing this, I'm already gone. I'm in the warehouse district, 4th and Morrison. They're coming for me now, I can hear them outside. I need you to know this wasn't random. This wasn't gang violence or a robbery gone wrong." A crash in the background. Elias's breathing quickened. "The one who wanted me gone wasn't a rival gang. It was the man who pretends to be a hero. Senator Julian Thorne. I found the evidence, Dad. The corruption, the shell companies, the market manipulation. He's been stealing from millions while shaking hands and kissing babies on Capitol Hill." Another sound. Closer. Elias's voice dropped to a whisper. "Beatrice carries the key to everything. Protect her. She's innocent in all this. The ledger will expose him, but you need..." Gunshots. Sharp and unmistakable. Then silence. The recording ended. Morgan stood frozen, his vision tunneling. Beatrice had moved beside him without him noticing, her small hand slipping into his. "He talked about you," she whispered. "He said his dad was scary, but he loved you anyway." Morgan's world had just tilted on its axis, and nothing would ever be the same. Salvatore Russo arrived before dawn, his silver hair immaculate despite the early hour. He'd been the Sampson family's legal shield for 30 years, navigating the murky waters between legitimate business and the empire Morgan had built in shadows. He found Morgan in the study, eyes bloodshot, the USB drive sitting on the desk between them like a loaded gun. "You're asking me to file emergency guardianship for a child you met yesterday," Salvatore said carefully, setting down his briefcase. "The courts will ask questions, Morgan. Questions you may not want to answer. Then make them stop asking. Manufacture whatever evidence you need. She's in danger, and she's all I have left of my son." Salvatore's expression softened. "I'll have the preliminary paperwork filed by noon. But Morgan, if what you told me on the phone is true, if you're planning to go after Senator Julian Thorne, you need to understand what you're facing. I'm facing the man who murdered my son. You're facing a sitting United States senator with presidential ambitions, unlimited resources, and the entire political establishment protecting him. Salvatore leaned forward. Evidence or not, challenging Thorne is suicide. He's untouchable. The media loves him, the party needs him, and he has friends in every agency that matters. My son didn't think he was untouchable. And your son is dead. The words hung in the air like smoke. Morgan's jaw clenched, but before he could respond, his secure phone vibrated on the desk. The burner he used only for the most sensitive communications. He picked it up. A single message from an unknown number. Asterisk, the little bird carries a sickness. Silence her, or everything you built will crumble. Asterisk. Morgan's blood went cold. He showed the screen to Salvatore, whose face paled. They already know, the lawyer whispered. Morgan, they know you have the girl, which means they know you have whatever Elias left behind. Morgan stood, walking to the window where morning light was just beginning to break over Manhattan. Somewhere in the city, in some protected office with American flags and polished wood, Senator Julian Thorne was making his move. Let them know, Morgan said quietly. Let them know I'm not my son. I don't play by rules or believe in redemption through proper channels. He turned back to Salvatore, and the lawyer saw something dangerous flickering in his eyes. Elias tried to expose them the right way. Now they'll learn what happens when you back a father into a corner with nothing left to lose. Salvatore closed his briefcase slowly. Then God help us all. By midday, Morgan had mobilized the full weight of his organization. 3 decades of carefully cultivated connections, judges who owed favors, social workers who looked the other way, bureaucrats whose mortgages he'd quietly paid, all activated with a single purpose: make Beatrice Melendez disappear from every system that tracked her. Salvatore worked his magic from Morgan's penthouse, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in carefully coded language. Yes, we have credible intelligence that the Kovac syndicate has targeted the child for leverage. Witness protection protocols should apply immediately. The Kovac syndicate didn't exist, but the paperwork Morgan's people generated made them terrifyingly real. Fabricated surveillance photos. Intercepted communications. A detailed threat assessment that painted Beatrice as collateral damage in a gang war that had never happened. Within 4 hours, Beatrice Melendez was legally removed from the foster system under emergency protective custody. Her records were sealed, her location classified, and her existence scrubbed from every database that mattered. Morgan watched from his office as Leah worked her digital sorcery, erasing footprints and planting false trails. Beatrice sat in the adjacent room with one of Morgan's most trusted men, a former Marine named Hayes who'd served with Elias and now provided personal security. Through the glass, Morgan saw the girl watching him. Her eyes were wide, processing the parade of dangerous-looking men moving through the penthouse with military efficiency. She'd seen Morgan make phone calls that ended with people saying "yes, sir" in voices that trembled slightly. She'd watched grown men, hard men with scars and cold eyes, defer to him without question. She should have been terrified. Any normal child would be. But when Morgan entered the room, Beatrice stood and walked toward him without hesitation. "You're like him," she said softly. "Elias said you were the strongest person he knew. He said if anything happened, you'd finish what he started." Morgan knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. His tattooed hands, which had ordered deaths and built an empire on violence, reached out gently to touch her shoulder. "I'm not a good man, Beatrice. Your hero, my son, he was good. I'm just the monster he came from." "Monsters don't keep promises," she said simply. "But you're keeping his." Something cracked inside Morgan's chest. This child, abandoned and alone, saw him more clearly than he saw himself. "You're safe now," he told her. "No one will touch you. I promise." Hayes approached, handing Morgan a secure tablet. "The senator's people are asking questions. They know we moved her." Morgan's expression hardened. "Good. Let them know exactly who they're dealing with." Comment, "Justice for Beatrice," if you believe corrupt politicians like Senator Thorne should be exposed. Don't let the silence win. Leah had been working for 16 hours straight, her eyes rimmed red from staring at cascading code. The USB drive had revealed its first secret, Elias's final message, but the core data remained locked behind encryption so sophisticated it bordered on paranoid. "Your son was brilliant," she muttered, pushing back from her workstation. "He didn't just encrypt this. He built a puzzle that requires something specific to unlock. A biometric signature, maybe a fingerprint scan, possibly even retinal data embedded in a physical key." Morgan leaned against the desk, exhaustion pulling at him. "Can you crack it?" "Not without whatever Elias designed as the key. He built this to be accessed by one person or someone that person trusted completely." She gestured at the screen where lines of encrypted data mocked them. "This could take months, maybe years. Or never." Beatrice had been sitting quietly in the corner, coloring in a book Hayes had bought her. But at Leah's words, she looked up, her small face thoughtful. "He gave me something," she said softly. "The same day he gave me the dog tags." Morgan turned. "What did he give you, sweetheart?" Beatrice reached beneath her collar and pulled out a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. She'd worn it hidden under her dress, so close to her skin that no one had noticed. The locket was small, intricate, with an engraving that matched the pattern on Elias's dog tags. "He said it was special. He said to keep it with the tags, always together. He said they were." She paused, trying to remember the exact words. Two halves of something important. Leah was across the room in seconds, her exhaustion forgotten. She took the locket carefully, examining it under a magnifying lamp. "There's a chip embedded in the metal. Microscopic circuitry." Her voice rose with excitement. "This isn't jewelry. This is a hardware key." She connected the locket to her system using a specialized adapter, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The screen flickered, changed, and suddenly, the encryption began to unravel like thread pulled from fabric. Files cascaded open. Spreadsheets, documents, bank records, communications. A digital avalanche of evidence 6 months in the making. Morgan watched the screen fill with names, numbers, and connections that formed a web of corruption so vast it seemed impossible. Shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. Stock trades executed seconds before major market movements. Wire transfers linking Senator Julian Thorne to dozens of offshore accounts. But it wasn't just Thorne. Federal judges, cabinet members, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. A network of power and wealth built on insider trading and market manipulation that had siphoned billions from ordinary investors. "My God," Leah whispered. Elias didn't just find evidence of one corrupt politician. He found the entire system. Morgan's hands gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. His son had died trying to expose this. Had died alone in a warehouse, knowing these names, carrying this truth. And somewhere in the files, Morgan knew, were the names of those who'd betrayed Elias directly. The ones who'd told Thorne where to find him. "Print everything," Morgan said quietly. "And Leah? Make copies. Lots of copies." Morgan spent the next 3 hours in his study, the door locked, reviewing every file Elias had compiled. The ledger was meticulous: dates, amounts, communication logs. His son had documented everything with the precision of a soldier preparing for war. Senator Thorne's network was vast. Federal prosecutors who dismissed cases. SEC investigators who buried reports. Media executives who killed stories before they could breathe. Each name came with evidence: wire transfers, encrypted messages, photographs of clandestine meetings. But it was a subfolder buried deep in the directory structure that made Morgan's blood run cold. The label read, "Internal Compromise." He opened it. 3 names stared back at him from the screen. Names he knew as well as his own. Men who'd sat at his table, who'd sworn loyalty, who'd attended Elias's funeral with tears in their eyes. Carlo Benedetti, his underboss, second in command for 15 years. Vincent Russo, Salvatore's younger brother, head of the family's financial operations. Marcus Delgado, his enforcer, the man Morgan trusted to handle the organization's most sensitive problems. The evidence was irrefutable. Monthly payments from shell companies controlled by Thorne. Communications coordinating movements and schedules. And there, timestamped 6 months and 2 days ago, 12 hours before Elias was killed, a message from Carlo to an encrypted number. Asterisk subject confirmed at warehouse. 4th and Morrison. Going in alone. No backup requested. Asterisk. Morgan's vision blurred. His hands trembled as he scrolled through more files. Carlo had fed them Elias's location. Vincent had provided financial intelligence that helped Thorne predict Elias's investigation. Marcus had ensured no one from the family interfered when the hit went down. They'd sold his son for stock tips and quarterly payouts. Pieces of silver for the life of the only good thing Morgan had ever created. A knock at the door. Salvatore's voice concerned. Morgan? You've been in there for hours. Morgan stood slowly, his movements mechanical. He opened the door to find his lawyer, loyal for 3 decades, standing in the hallway with worry etched across his face. Vincent, Morgan said quietly. Your brother. Did you know? Salvatore's expression shifted from concern to confusion. Know what? Morgan turned the laptop screen toward him. Watched as Salvatore's face drained of color, watched recognition and horror dawn in his eyes. Morgan, I swear to you, I had no idea. Vincent is my brother, but if he did. Morgan's voice was hollow. They all did. 3 men I trusted with my life sold my son to a politician for profit. Elias hadn't just been fighting corruption in Washington. He'd been fighting rot in his own father's house, surrounded by traitors who smiled at family dinners while plotting with the enemy. Morgan had built an empire on loyalty, and loyalty had murdered his son. Morgan stood at the window of his penthouse as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the city in shades of blood and gold. Behind him, Beatrice sat on the floor with Hayes, carefully arranging a puzzle the former Marine had found for her. Her small voice hummed a tune Morgan didn't recognize, innocent and pure in a room that had seen 3 decades of brutal decisions. He'd built this empire thinking power meant something. Thinking control and fear could insulate him from the chaos of the world. He'd accumulated wealth that could buy senators, judges, and silence. He'd commanded an army of men who would kill at his word. And none of it had saved his son. Elias had rejected everything Morgan offered, the money, the protection, the family business, and chosen honor instead. Had chosen the military, then chosen to fight corruption, and finally chosen to protect an abandoned child nobody else cared about. Morgan had built a kingdom. Elias had built a legacy. Mr. Morgan? Beatrice's small voice pulled him from his thoughts. She stood beside him now, her puzzle abandoned. Are you sad? He knelt down, bringing himself to her level. This close, he could see Elias in her eyes, not physically, but in the trust she carried, the hope she still held despite everything the world had done to her. Beatrice, I need to make you a promise, he said, his rough voice cracking slightly. And I need you to know that when I make promises, I keep them. She nodded solemnly, understanding this was important. I will finish what Elias started. Every person who hurt him, every person who hurt you, everyone who uses power to destroy the innocent, I will find them, and I will make sure they can never hurt anyone again. He took her small hands in his tattooed ones. I will keep you safe. Not just today or tomorrow, but always. You are my family now, and I protect my family. Even though you're scary, she asked with childlike honesty. Especially because I'm scary. Sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to be a bigger monster. He touched her cheek gently. But I will never, ever be a monster to you. Beatrice threw her small arms around his neck, hugging him with the desperate strength of a child who'd been alone too long. Morgan held her, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, purpose that wasn't built on violence for its own sake, but violence in service of something greater. His son had shown him the way. Now Morgan would walk that path, even if it burned down everything he'd built. Behind them, Hayes watched silently, and for the first time in 6 months, he saw the boss smile. Hit subscribe now if you stand with Morgan and Beatrice. We're fighting against all the bad people, traitors, corrupt officials, and those who hurt children, so don't side with evil and miss the next chapter. Morgan convened the meeting at midnight in a warehouse he owned in Red Hook, one of the few properties the traitors had never accessed. Only 5 men received the call, his most trusted loyalists, soldiers who'd bled beside him long before the organization grew into an empire. They arrived separately, understanding the gravity of an emergency summons at this hour. Hayes stood guard at the entrance, while Leah monitored digital chatter from a mobile command center she'd set up in the back office. "Gentlemen," Morgan began, his voice carrying the weight of command that had built his empire. "6 months ago, my son was murdered. Tonight, I learned that 3 of our own, Carlo, Vincent, and Marcus, sold him to Senator Julian Thorne for profit." The silence that followed was absolute. These men had known Elias, had watched him grow up. The betrayal cut deeper than any rival's attack ever could. "We're going to war," Morgan continued. "Not just against Thorne, but against everyone in his network. Federal officials, corporate executives, the entire web of corruption my son died exposing. We're burning it all down." "What about the traitors?" asked Dmitri, a Russian immigrant who'd been with Morgan for 20 years. "Elimination protocol. Tonight. Quietly. I want them to simply disappear. No bodies, no evidence, no closure for their families. They get the same mercy they showed my son." Morgan's expression was stone. "But that's secondary. Our primary objective is Senator Thorne. I want his entire operation exposed, his assets frozen, his network in handcuffs." He pulled up Elias's ledger on a large screen. The men studied it silently, understanding the magnitude of what they were seeing. "Leah is making copies. By tomorrow morning, every major news outlet will receive an anonymous package containing everything. Bank records, communications, names, and dates. The evidence is irrefutable." "Thorne will run," said Marcus, not the traitor Marcus, but Marcus Chin, head of the family's intelligence operations. "I'm counting on it. I want him to feel what it's like to have nowhere to hide, no one to trust, and enemies closing in from every direction." Morgan's jaw tightened. "My son tried to take him down through proper channels. Now he learns what happens when you back a criminal into a corner." Within the hour, 3 separate teams deployed across the city. Carlo was leaving his mistress's apartment. Vincent was at his club downtown. Marcus was home with his family, believing himself untouchable. By morning, all 3 would be gone, and Senator Julian Thorne's world would begin to crumble. Don't be a spectator to injustice. Hit the like button to show your support for the battle against this senator's crime ring. At 3:47 a.m., Morgan pressed send on an encrypted email that would detonate like a bomb across the political landscape. The recipient was Marcus Webb, an investigative journalist at The Guardian who'd built a career exposing corruption in high places. The attachment contained every file from Elias's ledger, unencrypted, verified, and devastating. By dawn, Senator Julian Thorne's carefully constructed world would begin to collapse. Leah monitored the digital response from her workstation, tracking as the files spread through secure channels to other journalists, law enforcement agencies beyond Thorne's reach, and international financial regulators. "It's done," she said quietly. "There's no stopping this now. By noon, every major outlet will be running the story." Morgan nodded, feeling the weight of 6 months lift slightly from his shoulders. This wasn't the ending. Thorne had resources, lawyers, and powerful friends who'd try to bury the truth. But Elias had given them something impossible to ignore, documentation so thorough that even the most corrupt system couldn't suppress it entirely. Hayes appeared in the doorway. "The 3 are handled. Clean. No trails." "Good." Morgan stood, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had sustained him through the night was fading, leaving only the profound weariness of a father who'd lost everything and found something unexpected in the ruins. He walked to the guest bedroom where Beatrice slept, her small form barely visible under the covers. She'd fallen asleep hours ago, clutching the silver locket and dog tags against her chest. Morgan sat on the edge of the bed, watching her breathe peacefully, unaware of the war being waged in her name. Gently, he tucked the blanket around her shoulders and brushed a strand of hair from her face. This child, abandoned, alone, and somehow still trusting, had become the center of everything. Not his empire, not his revenge, but her safety and future. "I found him, Elias," Morgan whispered into the darkness. "I found your purpose. The thing you died protecting." His voice cracked. "I understand now why you chose honor over everything I offered. You saw what I couldn't. That legacy isn't built on power, but on who we protect when no one's watching." Beatrice stirred slightly, her small hand reaching out in sleep. Morgan took it, holding it gently in his scarred, tattooed palm. He'd been a crime boss for 30 years, a father for 25. But in this moment, watching over the child his son had died to save, Morgan Sampson became something he'd never imagined, a grandfather with a purpose worth living for. The war for justice was just beginning, but Morgan Sampson was now armed with the purest weapon of all, a grandfather's love for the child his son died to save. If you believe in redemption and finding light in the darkest places, please subscribe and share this story. Let's build a community that fights for the good in the world.